Now we shall also look at the American culture, with American literature and art and cultural movements, an America that's in flux. The picture you see there is of Dr. Alexander Cartwright, a fire chief, but also the person who is widely credited with inventing the game of baseball. As I said, for the longest time in the early Republican period and after the War of 1812, the United States was seen culturally as nothing more than an annex of England. But now it was starting to develop its own American literature and art. And it actually starts with, of all people, a Frenchman, Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote Democracy in America, which followed his great tour of the country, which he calls America, the Land of Opportunity. But soon American writers now join the scene. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the great American poets that you study in your English class, who wrote of transcendentalism. He was an abolitionist. He's a nonconformist. Emerson was a favorite of the Xxviii generation. And Emerson called for American scholarship. One of his friends and proteges was Henry David Thoreau, who wrote Walden, also known as Life on the Pond, trying to get away from the overly sanitized industrial age that had come upon America. This was striving for a more simple life. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." It's the opening passage of The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, one of the leaders of the Romantic movement. Was a writer of mystery and macabre. You say, how can mystery and macabre be part of the Romantic movement? Remember, the Romantic movement is not just about Hallmark movies and such. It is about emotion. And Poe taps the darkness of human emotion. He's the chief developer of the American short story and wrote great tales such as The Cask of Amontillado, The Black Cat, The Pit and the Pendulum, and the Fall of the House of Usher, and wrote such great poems as The Raven and Annabel Lee. Then you had Lydia Sigourney, one of the first American women to work as a professional writer. She's also part of the Romantic movement. James Fenimore Cooper, who gives us the American novel, and wrote the Leatherstocking Tales, including The Pioneers and The Last of the Mohicans. And then there was Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote moral allegories such as The Scarlet Letter. Talked about the double standard of women and men in Puritan New England. Here you see a painting from what is called the Hudson Valley School. And what you notice about the Hudson Valley School is it's very detailed, but it's also very exaggerated. You don't have mountains that are 10 to 14,000 feet high in the Adirondacks. Nonetheless, the stress is not on accuracy, but on the detail. Clockwise from the top left is Alexis de Tocqueville, and then to his right is James Fenimore Cooper, Lydia Sigourney. You see the haunted face of Edgar Allan Poe, who died at the age of 40, in Baltimore, Maryland. And that is why the football team is named the Ravens. Henry David Thoreau, and finally Nathaniel Hawthorne. The American culture also had a number of cultural movements at this time. Immigrant worker cultures were engaging in social activities designed to ameliorate the poverty and the squalid conditions of industrial America. They went to theaters and minstrel shows. They engaged in sporting events like boxing, bare knuckle boxing. And, of course, there was the saloon. The saloon is more than just a place to go and get a pint. The saloon was a meeting hall, a proto-bank of sorts for certain immigrants. Women had significantly less social activity, but the cult of domesticity did encourage things like visiting, washing, reading, and sewing. You say, wow, what women's work that is. But in truth, those are very important activities in which women exchanged information and formed networks of their own. And then, of course, there is slave culture. Slave culture brought in certain styles of African dress that survived. You had music, traditional African instruments and melodies that would be preserved and transformed and would later form the foundation of the quintessential American musical form, jazz. But most importantly, you had trickster tales. Trickster tales were tales in which an animal, using animals, anthropomorphous animals, would engage in a series of adventures, mostly in which the smaller, weaker creature would get one over on the stronger, more virile creatures. And this was a way to say that slaves could be on top, even though they appeared not to have the power. And so you had things like Anansi the spider, and then you had Brer Rabbit. And all these trickster tales were put into a compendium by Joel Chandler Harris at Laurel Plantation in Louisiana, up on the west bank of the river. This was called the Uncle Remus Tales, which later got put into a movie by Walt Disney called Song of the South, which will not be ever shown again because it is considered to be politically incorrect. You also had American community movements such as Robert Owen's New Harmony, which was a communistic community, a utopian community. All property was owned in commune in southwestern Indiana. Then you also had the Shakers. Mother Ann Lee is the founder of the Shaker movement, who engaged in rhythmic dance and shaking. They practiced strict celibacy, which means that the United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing, which is the official name of the Shakers, did not last very long. Although they still survive, there's very few of them. They're well known for their fine handicrafts and furniture, especially those chairs that have the seats that are woven out of straw. And then, of course, the Mormons. Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormons, started in New York State along the Erie Canal, grew up in terrible poverty, and believed that he found or transcribed the 12 tablets in a cave in New York into the Book of Mormon. He then moved his community to Nauvoo in southern Illinois. And the Book of Mormon is the spiritual testament of the Mormon faith. Here you see Shaker dance during worship. Made Shakers oftentimes the butt of many jokes. And this is the dwelling house at Sabbath Day Lake Shaker Village, which is the only active Shaker community which is located in New Gloucester, Maine. This was an America that was in flux. Why? Because another awakening was taking place, led by Charles Grandison Finney, the Jonathan Edwards of his time. Charles Grandison Finney had all the charm and charisma that Jonathan Edwards had, and he leads the Second Great Awakening, which centers on what's called postmillennialism. The millennium was believed to be the 1,000-year rule of peace and prosperity that preceded the second coming of Christ. And so, as a result of this, you had many people going around trying to bring about the second coming of Christ through good works like Christian benevolence. They built orphanages and asylums, and this caught on. And Dorothea Dix became a reformer in the treatment of the mentally ill. As usual, some of this Christian benevolence turned into attempts at social control. Many of these movements were anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant. This is where public education comes in. Horace Mann, who gives us the understanding of what public education is all about, and that public education is designed to Americanize young children. There's also the temperance movement, that is the movement to moderate alcohol consumption. This is not prohibition, it's temperance. This is where you attack vice and attack saloons. And, of course, abolition. You had the American Colonization Society, which advocated returning African Americans to Africa, to which many African Americans said, no, thank you, we're Americans, we will stay here. And but some did go, and it helped found the nation of Liberia, whose capital city is called Monrovia, after James Monroe. And you had also radical abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison, who wrote a newsletter called The Liberator. Just like in the First Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening allowed for many open meetings, revival meetings, people coming forward to be saved. Once again, the aspect of Christ's coming was on the minds of many people. Here you see two pro-temperance cartoons. One is of a family destitute by the fire, as the drunken husband can't get any work and dominates the family. And here you see how a stairway works as the man goes from being a good teetotaling individual to a drunkard. In the lower left of this slide is Dorothea Dix. In the upper center is Horace Mann. And in the lower right is the very fanatic-looking William Lloyd Garrison. In this next slide, you see the very poignant stare of one Mr. Frederick Douglass, who was one of the great abolitionists of his time also.